Cabo the Great and a few hunters arrived at the castle under the cover of night. The scent was strong, thick in the cold air. They exchanged tense glances. This was it. Eli was inside. The castle loomed before them, a menacing fortress bristling with guards stationed at every corner. The snake people were everywhere. This was their second stronghold, more fortified and dangerous than the last. One of the hunters leaned closer to Cabo and whispered, "I think we should come back another day. We cannot take them on." His voice trembled slightly, betraying his fear. Cabo the Great didn't reply immediately. He stood motionless, his eyes locked on the castle. His eyes burned with an intensity. He could sense them, the snakes, slithering through the corridors. Cabo clenched his fists, his ancestral rage boiling within him. Turning back was not an option. Eli had to be finished tonight. This was a mission of destiny. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. Inside the castle, Eli lay in restless sleep, his body frail and battered from the trials of battle and escape. Each breath was a struggle, but his will to survive remained unbroken. He knew his people depended on him. He had failed them before, failed Maria, and he could not let it happen again. He couldn't afford to falter, not now. Outside, Cabo began his ascent. The castle walls were slick with dew, but Cabo moved with the newfound agility of a hunter, his senses sharper and his body more responsive with every passing day. Climbing had become second nature. The faint scent of Eli's blood guided him, pulling him toward an open window. Silently, he slipped inside, unsheathing his sword as his eyes adjusted to the darkness. The room was quiet, save for the faint sound of breathing. And then he saw him, Eli. Cabo's pulse quickened. The moment he had dreamed of was finally here. This would be the end of Eli, the leader of the snake people. He gripped his sword tightly, preparing to strike. Eli stirred at the faint noise of Cabo's approach, his eyes fluttering open. At first he thought it might be Daniel checking on him, but then his gaze locked onto the figure in the shadows, two piercing eyes burning with vengeance. His breath caught in his throat as fear consumed him. He tried to summon the strength to transform into his serpent form, but his body betrayed him. He was too weak. This was the end. Cabo raised his sword, every muscle in his body coiled for the strike. But just as he moved to deliver the fatal blow, a sudden shift in the room froze him. A figure sprang to life, Daniel, Eli's nephew, who had been sleeping beside the bed. In an instant, Daniel transformed into a monstrous snake, his form towering over Cabo. The sheer size and power of the transformation were staggering, far beyond anything Cabo had anticipated. The force of it sent Cabo stumbling backward, his confidence momentarily shaken. Realizing the danger, Cabo made a split-second decision. With a leap, he dove out of the window, disappearing into the night. His mission was unfinished, but survival was paramount now. Inside the castle, Daniel coiled protectively around his uncle, his fierce eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of the hunter's return. The audacity of Cabo's infiltration sent shockwaves through the snake people. If the hunters were bold enough to strike at the heart of their stronghold, no place was truly safe. The snake people would need to fortify their defenses further, to become even more vigilant. This had been a close call, too close, they could not afford another. The celebration roared on into the night, the echoes of laughter and the rhythm of drums weaving through the air. Cabo stood amidst the joyous crowd, raising his goblet high. "We have had a period of recovery for our people," he began, his voice strong and commanding. "We have married. We have had children." His eyes softened as they fell upon his family, lingering on his wife and children. Love and pride emanated from his eyes, a rare tenderness in a leader who carried the weight of their people on his shoulders. Then his tone shifted, sharper now. "But now it is time to go back into the fray." He turned, lifting his goblet higher. "Congratulations to Sia and his team for successfully opening up the hunt." Cheers erupted, the hunters raising their drinks in unison. Cabo's voice carried over the noise. "We will go into the mountains, we will go into the valleys, and we will make sure that the snake people who are away from Snake Island never join it or reorganize." The hunters roared louder, a fierce unity binding them. The night became alive with laughter, dance, and celebration of their triumph. Tendai sat at the edge of the gathering, his gaze wandering over the lively scene. He couldn't help but smile as his eyes fell on Zoro and Nala, who were swaying together in a dance. They had been married for a few years now, a union that had been a source of whispers among the hunters. Nala had divorced her human husband to be with Zoro, a decision many had warned her against. "It'll never work with Zoro, he's too unpredictable," they had said. But now, as Tendai watched them, their joy was undeniable. He felt warmth rise in his chest, happy for his grandfather, whose smile hadn't dimmed once since Cabo's wedding. "Tendai, would you like to dance?" A gentle voice pulled him from his thoughts. He turned to see Malika standing beside him, her dark eyes shimmering under the moonlight. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No, Malika. You know I don't know how to dance." "Well, I can teach you," she said, her smile widening. "No," he replied more firmly this time. "I'd rather sit here." Malika's smile faded for a moment, but she quickly nodded, her disappointment hidden behind a polite expression. "Okay," she said quietly, before stepping away. As she passed, she exchanged a small nod with Sia, who was seated next to Tendai. "She likes you," Sia said, his tone light but pointed. "No," Tendai replied with a faint smirk. "She's just friendly." "Malaika is Zaria's sister. She's a Makina. You're lucky to be liked by her," Sia pressed. "She holds a very important name. If you were to—" "Father, stop," Tendai interrupted. "She doesn't like me like that." Sia chuckled, leaning back. "Maybe you should consider it. Look at your grandfather. Who would have thought he'd be out there dancing?" He gestured toward Zoro, who was twirling Nala on the dance floor, his once stern demeanor completely replaced by carefree joy. "I thought he was a tough guy," Tendai said, grinning. "He's not so tough after all." They shared a laugh, watching Zoro continue his lively display. Then Tendai's expression grew thoughtful. "Well, I don't know about girls," he admitted. "I don't think I'm good at that." He glanced sideways at his father. "What about you? What was the story with you and Mother?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Sia's face darkened, his frown deepening. "Your mother is long gone," he said curtly. "That's all you need to know." Tendai sighed, knowing the conversation was over as always. He looked toward the dance floor again, where Malika was now surrounded by a group of younger hunters. She laughed as one of them twirled her joy infectious. Tendai felt a strange tightness in his chest as he watched. Malika was beautiful, radiant even, but he pushed the feeling aside. Relationships, he thought, made people soft. He couldn't afford that. A messenger approached, carrying a small letter. He handed it to Sia, who quickly tore it open. Tendai leaned closer. "What is it, father?" Sia's eyes scanned the paper, his expression turning cold. His face hardened as he whispered, "I don't know." But the way he stared at the handwriting said otherwise. Tendai watched as Sia's hand tightened around the letter. He knew something was wrong. "Father," he pressed. Sia said nothing, the words taking over his thoughts, written in familiar handwriting. "I would like to see you at our usual place. Come alone." Sia arrived at their meeting spot, his heart pounding in his chest. The dense forest around him was eerily silent, each shadow a potential danger. This could be a trap, he reminded himself, yet here he was. Every time she called, he came. He hated this part of himself, the part that would drop everything to see her, no matter the risk, no matter the cost to the brotherhood. And then she stepped out of the shadows, and his breath caught in his throat. There she was. "Sia," Palesa said softly, her voice carrying the weight of years. "Thank you so much for coming." He nodded, unable to summon the words. "Sure, always," he finally managed, though his voice wavered. "How is our son?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. Sia's heart clenched. He wanted to reach for her, to embrace her and find solace in her presence, but he remained rooted to the ground. Her scent, so unmistakably snake, felt foreign now. His faintly glowing eyes betrayed his tension, but he steadied himself. "Tendai is changing," Sia said at last. "He's becoming a man now. He's tall, you should see him. He's the best hunter I've ever seen." Palesa's expression softened, but her eyes glistened with tears. She nodded. "That's good," she said quietly. "That's very good news. But maybe not for my people." Silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. "Have you told him about me?" she asked hesitantly. Sia shook his head, guilt flickering across his face. "It's not something I can talk about." "I understand," Palesa said, her head bowing slightly. Then, after a pause, she lifted her gaze. "I was thinking, maybe I could meet him." Sia stared at her, his heart battling his mind. After a long pause, he shook his head again. "Tendai is not someone you want to meet," he said, his tone firm. "He's dedicated, too dedicated. As a hunter, his loyalty is unshakable. If he knew who you were, I don't think you'd survive that meeting." Her breath caught. She looked away, unable to respond. Sia, hesitant but needing to know, asked the question that had lingered in his mind for years. "And your husband? The one you were expecting a child with?" She hesitated, then exhaled deeply. "We're no longer together. Complications," she admitted. His heart fluttered unexpectedly. "Oh," he said quietly. "Really?" "Yes," she continued, a small smile forming on her lips. "My son is back at Snake Island, an overachiever like Tendai, very stubborn." Her smile grew wider, and for a moment they shared a brief laugh, a sliver of the past returning to them. "I've heard the hunters are back in action," she said, breaking the moment. Sia nodded gravely. "Yes, we are." He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "You shouldn't even be this far from Snake Island, Palesa. Why have you come, really? Don't tell me you're here just to see me after all this time." She hesitated, then admitted, "No, I'm on a mission for my queen." His jaw clenched. "Then you need to go back. The hunters are active. If they catch you, it's over." "I can take care of myself," she said, with a flicker of defiance. A lump formed in his throat. He couldn't bring himself to say what he feared most, that losing her even now would shatter him. "Please, Palesa, be careful," he said, his voice softer now. She nodded, her gaze lingering on him. "And you? Are you married? Seeing someone?" His answer surprised even himself. "Yes," he lied, forcing a small smile. "You know me. The ladies can't get enough." Her smile faded, jealousy flickering in her eyes. "I have to go," she said abruptly, stepping back. "So soon?" Sia asked, shock rippling through him. "Stay a bit longer, please." Palesa's lips tightened. "Well, maybe your girlfriends are missing you. I've taken too much of your time." "Palesa," he said, frustration slipping into his tone. "You had a husband and a child in the name of duty, and I can't even have a girlfriend?" Her face fell. "I will never hear the end of it, will I?" "No," he said, his voice breaking. "Because it broke my heart, Palesa. More than you'll ever know." Tears welled in her eyes and she turned her face away. "I missed you," Sia whispered, his voice raw. She looked at him, her expression crumbling. "I missed you too," she admitted, her voice trembling. She had wanted to leave angry, to avoid this moment of vulnerability. Instead, she felt her power slipping. "I have to go, Sia. I can't be away for too long. My people await." "Wait, Palesa," he pleaded, reaching for her, but she was already stepping back into the shadows. He wanted to tell her he had lied, that he wasn't with anyone, and that the truth was he could not bring himself to fall in love again. But she was gone. And as Palesa disappeared into the shadows, she fought the urge to turn back, to run to him and confess the truth, that her relationship had fallen apart because the man she had married was not him and could never compare. But she kept running, her heart aching with every step, afraid that if she spoke the words aloud, it would make the pain all too real. Nandi sat in her room staring at the wall. She couldn't bring herself to turn on the TV. She couldn't bear to watch the trial, knowing the love of her life was suffering. Her mind kept racing to Diallo or Nala, hoping they'd walk in with some news about Jengo. Her hands shook as she clasped them together, praying silently. The door handle turned. Her breath hitched. She wasn't sure what to expect, comfort or catastrophe. But as the door opened, her heart stopped. Jengo stood there. She blinked, her mind scrambling to make sense of it. It couldn't be. Maybe this was his ghost, here to say goodbye. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at him. She wanted to speak, but her words stuck in her throat. If this was a dream, she didn't want to wake up. "Aren't you going to give me a hug?" Jengo said, his voice warm and familiar. Her breath caught. She stammered, "Are you really here?" "Yes," he said, smiling faintly. The goddess gave me another chance. Before she could think, she leapt into his arms, clutching him as though he might vanish at any moment. "Thank the goddess," she sobbed, trembling in his embrace. He was alive, solid, warm. It was real. "What happened to you? How are you here?" "A lot happened," he said softly, stroking her hair. "I'll explain everything, but later." His voice carried the weight of someone who had been through too much. But then, Jengo's eyes narrowed. He sniffed the air, his face darkening slightly. "Nandi," he said slowly, "did we not burn the clothes I came back with from the forest?" His gaze turned sharp, scanning the room. "I smell something off." "Snake." Nandi froze, her blood turning cold. She forced a laugh. "Oh, that? It's probably just the hamper. You know how it is. Old clothes, sweaty hunts, all that." She gestured vaguely, trying to sound casual. "I'll take care of it." Jengo stared at her, his glowing eyes unreadable. "Make sure you do," he said, his voice firm. "That smell, it's not something to ignore." Nandi nodded quickly, her heart pounding. She had been careless, too careless. Diallo had warned her. She silently vowed to never skip her medication again, the pills that masked her scent. This was far too close for comfort, but as Jengo pulled her close again, she allowed herself a moment of relief. He was back. That was all that mattered now. The next day, the air in the council room was thick with tension. Jengo sat at the head of the table, his face stern and commanding. Nandi sat beside him. He leaned over and whispered, "You didn't need to wear so much perfume, my love. We can all smell it." Her face flushed. She forced a smile, hoping it didn't look too strained. "Just trying something new," she said lightly. Inside, her nerves were fraying. The scent of the snake was faint but there. She was playing with fire and she knew it. Diallo shot her a look. He had told her not to come to this meeting, but here she was. The council elders filed in, taking their seats. Jengo rose to his feet, his voice calm but firm. "The last time we sat here, things got heated. Words were exchanged and decisions were made. For that, I want to apologize. I shouldn't have gone over the council's head." Elder Mbali spoke up, her voice steady. "Jengo, there's no need to apologize. On behalf of the council, I say we leave the past behind us. What's done is done." The other elders murmured their agreement. There was a tangible shift in the room. Respect for Jengo grew even stronger, and they leaned forward, waiting for him to continue. "The issue with the snake people remains," Jengo said. "Their queen has asked for peace, 14 years to be exact. While I believe peace is necessary, 14 years is ambitious. I propose we negotiate for something shorter." The room buzzed with quiet discussion, and one by one, the elders gave their opinion until they reached an agreement. Jengo smiled faintly. "Then it's settled. We will send a delegation to meet with the snake people and finalize the terms." "I'll go," Diallo volunteered, his voice steady. "I'll go too," Nandi said suddenly, surprising everyone, including herself. She needed to get away. The whispers in the corridors, the questioning looks from the hunters. They were suffocating her. Jengo frowned. "Nandi." "Me too," Nala chimed in, cutting him off. "I'm coming." Jengo stared at them, his confusion obvious. "If you're all going, then I have no choice. I'll go too," said Samuel. Jengo ran a hand over his face, exhaling loudly. "Fine. But Nala, you're staying here. You've caused enough trouble for one lifetime," he said. Nala pouted but didn't argue. With a heavy heart, he said, "You leave at first light tomorrow." They nodded and went to prepare. And that, my dear tribe, concludes yet another thrilling episode of our Snake People vs. Hunters series. In this chapter, Cabo the Great made a daring attempt on Eli's life, but Daniel rose to the occasion and saved the day. Meanwhile, Tendai finds himself torn between his budding feelings for a love interest and his unrelenting quest to become the greatest hunter, all while seeking answers about his mother's identity. Elsewhere, Sia crossed paths with Palesa, reopening old wounds and rekindling long-buried emotions. And finally, a delegation was sent to the Snake People to broker peace, but the question lingers. How long will this fragile truce hold? Stay tuned, because the story is far from over. Want to support the channel and become an even bigger part of our tribe? You can join for as little as the cost of a coffee each month. Your support helps me continue creating the content you love, but of course, just having you here is already more than enough. Thank you for being part of this journey. A warm and heartfelt thank you to all the amazing tribe members who have chosen to join and support this incredible journey. Your belief in this channel means the world to me, and I'm so glad to have you along for the ride. And as always, thank you for watching our story, and we hope you enjoyed it. What lessons did you draw from this story? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and be part of the tribe. Thank you for watching The Tales of the Savannah. We will see you next time in the Savannah.